Hello, everyone, and welcome to XCMeducate's Expert Speaker Series, Recurring Tasks and Rollovers. My name is Amy Silvestri, and I will be your presenter today. During this session, I will discuss the recurring tasks and rollover processes, and we'll walk through each process in our live site. The webinar will then open for Q&A. Before I get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar. XCM Solutions is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. As such, we're excited to offer 1 CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 3 polls will be conducted throughout this presentation, and you will need to participate in all 3 polls in order to receive CPE credit. Your CPE certificate will be sent to the email you used to register for the webinar within 72 hours after the session. If you do not receive your certificate within those 72 hours, please email us at xcmclientservices@xcmsolutions.com. If you experience difficulty answering the polling questions, please type your answer in the questions pane of the control panel, and we will ensure you receive credit for those questions. You will also have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. I'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If I don't get to your question during today's webinar, I will be sure to follow up afterwards. So with that, let's get started. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about auto rollover, manual rollovers, and recurring tasks. We're going to look at the logic of all of them. We'll talk about the pros and cons of them all. And then we'll jump into today, the live site, and we'll go step by step through each one of them. We'll show you how to turn on auto rollover, how to do a manual rollover, and then how to set up a recurring tasks. Once I do that, we'll open it up for questions at the end. So to get started, we're going to start with the auto rollover option. And the auto rollover process is a simple process that generally we set up with our customers a year after they've been with XCM. So that first year that you get started, we give you time to get together your checklist, your deliverables, make sure that the tasks are set up the way you want them, they're working the way you want them. And then after that first year period, we'll have a conversation about turning on the auto rollover process for you. Just makes it easier so anything that needs to be adjusted can be adjusted before that process goes on and starts to automatically turn the work around these. The auto rollover logic is, in this example, we're going to be using the quarterlies. So we're using a quarterly. Generally, the auto rollover is used for yearly options, but the quarterlies can be done if you want to have visibility of them. So in our example, you'll see we have Q1 set up. When Q1 task is done, it would automatically roll to Q1 of the following year. Q2 would then be worked on. When Q2 was done, you would be able to go to Q2. It would roll to the following year, Q3 to Q3 the following year, and then Q4 to Q4 the following year. So it does roll, auto rollovers do roll on a year-to-year basis, not quarter to quarter. So some of the pros to the auto rollover is that you have visibility. These tasks are out there and they're ready to be seen and they're ready to be searched for. They're also reportable. So because they're visible out in the system, if you wanted to run a due date report that would include your auto rollover tasks, they would be included and that would be able to be run. And then the last thing is it's automatic. It's status triggered. So there are 3 statuses that you can move that task to that will trigger your task to automatically roll to the next fiscal year or year. Those 3 triggers are completed, filing not required, and prepared by client. So if a task is moved to one of those 3 statuses, you'll then be able to see and search for that task for the next year. The cons are there's limited points to roll over. So as I mentioned, if you set up those quarterlies, it's going to go Q1 to Q1 of 2019 to Q1 of 2020. When you start Q2, if you had points in that 2019 that you wanted to go to the next quarter, they're not going to roll to that next quarter. They're going to roll to Q1 of the following year. So you don't have that ability to roll the points with those tasks. It also causes some clutter in your system. If you have a monthly bookkeeping task and you want them to auto rollover, you would have 12 tasks set up out there, as opposed to just one task that you would have if you were to set up using the recurring tasks, which we'll get into later in the broadcast. So auto rollover is great for yearly tasks, such as like a 1065, a 1040, or something like that. And then the other thing is it starts in the status of no info in, like all tasks do. So when it rolls to no info in. Once you move that task out into the workflow, there is no way to move it back to that no info in status. And as I mentioned before, the task must be moved to one of the three statuses, either completed, prepared by client, or filing not required in order to trigger it to roll forward. The manual rollover process is somewhat similar to our recurring task logic, except you have to do it manually. So you could roll Q1 to Q2, but you have to do it manually. Q2 to Q3 can be rolled, but manually, and so on and so forth through these, through your tasks. So with that, I'm going to put up a polling question for you, the first one of the day, to see, hopefully nobody saw my answers, to see what are the pros to the manual rollover of a task. Just going to give a little bit more time to let everybody get their answers in. Okay, it looks like just about everybody's responded, so we'll close the poll and share the results out. So the results show most people have said all of the above, which is the correct answer. We've got a couple of people that have selected some of them. So great, thanks for doing that. So let's walk through what those pros are. So the pros are it's easier for firm-wide changes to be made. So if you decide to make a change to your checklist or your deliverables, you can make that change ahead of time and then manually roll it over to the next year. Your points will carry forward from task to task. So remember, in the rollover of automatic rollover, it goes Q1 to Q1 of the next year. It doesn't go to that next quarter carrying any of your points over. So if you do a manual rollover, you're able to roll from Q1 to Q2 and carry your points. So you won't lose that important information along the way. And the other pro is that the timing of the new task is controlled. You have to do it manually, so you dictate when those new tasks will be created for your firm. So what are the cons? The cons are they're not automated, right? So you have to manually be responsible to do this. So either you or somebody in your firm or multiple people in your firm could be responsible for rolling these tasks over, which then could make it difficult to standardize throughout the firm, because if you have many people rolling these tasks over manually, you want to make sure everybody's bringing the right information and rolling them over properly to be able to standardize them. So recurring tasks and the recurring tasks logic. So similar to our manual rollover, they're similar to the manual rollover, except that you don't have to do it manually. You tell the system what you want it to do, and it's automatically going to roll those tasks and push them out based on the rules that you're setting for them. So Q1 will roll to Q2, which will roll to Q3, so on and so forth for the continued life of this task or this recurring pattern that you're setting up. This can go on for months and months and months. You don't have to worry about recreating this once they're out and they're rolling. They're just going to continue to roll until you go in and end the recurrence pattern by selecting the cancel recurrence button. So you're telling it when it's going to happen, how often it's going to happen, and how you want it to show when you set this up. So the pros to the recurring tasks is there's less clutter. So in our example of the monthly bookkeeping, you won't have to have 12 monthly tasks out there. You'll have one task that will create, and then when you tell the next one to create, it will push out, and the next one, and the next one. So you don't have all of those tasks out there cluttering up your system. When you create a recurring pattern, you can have it push to a user's MyView page. So unlike the rollovers, that just roll over to the no info in, and then you would have to go in, or somebody in your firm will have to go in, search for those tasks, and then move it to the first step in the workflow and assign it to that person. The recurring tasks, you have the option to push it to someone in your firm to their MyView pages if you choose to do so. And then the points will carry similar to the manual rollover. The points will carry from quarter to quarter. There are some cons to the recurring tasks. There's limited visibility. If a partner wanted to see all jobs that they have for ABC Corp for the year for monthly bookkeeping, and you have recurring tasks set up, you're not going to see all of those tasks if you run a report in January. You'll probably see January, and depending on when you had the February tasks push out, you might see February, but you're not going to see the ones for March, April, and May. So the visibility is something to consider. However, it's a monthly thing. So if you're doing your monthly bookkeeping, it's on a monthly basis. You know that you're going to pull that report, and you're going to be able, you'll know you have one every month that's gonna flow out. It can be difficult to confirm accuracy of the pattern you created. This is a bit of a challenge at first, but once you get comfortable with recurring tasks and you get confident setting up your recurring tasks, you're going to be fine. Often we suggest when you do get started, if you're new to recurring tasks, what we suggest is you put a calendar reminder on your calendar to go in and check for the ones that you've set up. Check to make sure that on the day that you're telling it to push out to the system, it's actually pushed out and you can see it and search for it in the system. And then they're difficult to edit. You can create recurring tasks in bulk, but if you have to make any edits, you'll have to go into each individual pattern and make that edit for it. So one important note, make sure that the task type you're using is not being used for an auto rollover because the logic won't be clear to the system. So if your auto rollover tasks create before the pattern of your recurring tasks, when the pattern goes to push out, it's going to look out there and it's going to say, oh no, this already exists, so I can't push one out because it's already out there. So what does that mean? If you're doing, in our examples today, we're going to use an estimated tax payment. So if you're using estimated payments for 1040, you don't want to use the 1040 task type because that's most likely going to be already set up for your recurring task. So when you set up the task for, it's going to already be set up for your automated rollover. So what you're going to want to do is maybe have a task type that's individual estimates. Then you can set up your recurring pattern on that. So when the tasks push out, they're not bumping up against each other to say Amy Silvestri's 1040 for 12/31/19. Well, when I go to push this out from recurring tasks, it's just not going to work. So we want to make sure we're setting it up against task types that don't already have the auto rollover turned on. So I'm going to post one more polling question before we get into the things you have to think about when you're doing recurring tasks. Give everybody a little bit of time just to answer this question. Okay, great. So it looks like about 80% of people are already using the recurring tasks. So hopefully this section of the presentation will be a refresher for you. So recurring task setup. One way that we like to describe it for those that haven't used it, or sometimes we have a lot of people that are using them, and I know for my own self, it took me a long time to really grasp how to set this up and understand it fully. It took one of our colleagues to tell us, think of an Outlook calendar. Think of you're setting up a meeting for Thursdays at 10 o'clock and you want this to be a quarterly meeting. What's the first thing you do when you set up that calendar invite? You set it up for the first Thursday that you want to have that meeting. So I want to have that meeting on Thursday, June 30th. I'm going to set that meeting up for Thursday of June 30th. Once I do that, then I have to go in and I have to click on the recurrence button and set the time and tell it whether I want to do this daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly, fill in that information, and then go ahead and save it, and it will create that recurring pattern. The difference between an Outlook calendar entry recurrence and an XCM recurring task is when you create your calendar entry, you're able to see it on June 30th You're able to see it 3 months later on that Thursday that you wanted to have it. And then you're able to see it 3 months later. So you have that confidence that it's been set up, it's on everybody's calendar, and you can see it. In XCM, you don't have that visibility right away until it gets pushed out. So the way we set up recurring tasks in XCM, we're going to use today this example of estimated payments, right? So we all know that estimates aren't due on a quarterly basis. They're due 1/15, then a couple months later they're due 4/15, then 2 months later they're due in June 15th, and then September 15th. So it's not a solid 3 months every time. So they have a special date or special option that you need to set up for them, which you can do in XCM. In the recurring tasks, it gives you the ability to set up. You can do quarterlies, you can do weeklies, you can do monthlies, you can do dailies, and you can also use a special option where you can put the dates in there that you want. And it doesn't matter what order you put the dates in. What you have to remember is the first thing you need to do when setting up your recurring task is you need to set up that first task for it. So in our example, we're already in June. We're already in July. So we want to set up a recurring task that starts on 9/15. So the first thing we have to do is we manually have to set up that 9/15 task. And we'll walk through this in the system when we get into the live system so you can see exactly how you do this. But you have to set up a manual task first and then push the pattern out against that one. Do you want to see your due dates for these estimates? You probably do. You probably want to see when they're, what's due in April, what's due in September, what's due in June, and so on. So when you set up that manual task, you'll also want to remember to set up a deliverable for it so you can track those due dates. And then the last thing you have to do when you're setting it up is you have to tell it when do you want to see that task. And in the system, you have the ability to tell it, do you want it to push out on 9/15? Probably not, because you want to have time to get it prepared and get it ready to go out to your client so that they can get their money together and send it in by the 9/15 deadline. So what we'll want to do is maybe we want to set it up 15 days before. So it rolls out on the 1st of September or the 2nd of September. And then we have 15 days or 10 days to get it ready and get it out to our customers. So you have the ability to set that up in your recurring patterns. So with those three logics discussed, we're going to now jump into our live site, and we're going to walk through each one of these processes to on how to do each one of these. So we'll start with our manual rollover. So our manual rollover, you can do right from the control sheet. So you do need to have a user right, and most of the things we're going to discuss today do require a user right. But to get into that control sheet, you're going to use the blue hyperlink. We're going to look at Nancy Silvestri today. And we're going to come in here and we're going to see that they have the rollover button illuminated here on the right. If you don't have that rollover button, one of two things could be the problem. This task could be marked as do not roll over here under miscellaneous, and that would cause the button to not be functioning, or you don't have the user right for that, the user right to manually roll over or to roll over tasks. So if you don't have that, you would need to see your web admin to ask for the user right to be able to manually roll over these tasks. So to do a manual rollover, it's simple. You can come in on a task by task basis. You're going to come into the control sheet and you're going to hit rollover. And there are two ways to do a manual rollover. One is through the control sheet on a task by task. And once we walk through this, we'll jump into the utility so you can see how to roll multiple tasks over at a time. So you've clicked the button and you have a rollover box that pops up. And the information that you're giving in this box is the information that you want to carry over with that task to the next year. So you have the ability to put your shipping and assembly and shipping instructions. This is only going to roll over your shipping and assembly instructions from the prior year. So if you want to carry those over, you can click these buttons. You have the ability to force the knowledge, instructions, questions, and review points to the next year. So what do I mean when I say force them to roll? When we say force them, what it means is that at the task level, if your staff are marking these points as current period, current and next, or permanent, you don't want to check those boxes off here. Because if they're doing it at the task level, then it's automatically going to roll with the task, no matter how you do it, whether you do a rollover manually or an auto rollover. So if you're using it at the task level, you don't need to worry about putting them here. Because if you do check off these boxes, what it's going to do is it's going to ignore everything you've done at the task level, and it's going to roll over everything. So that's going to cause a bit of a headache for whoever's in charge of your point section, whether it be the staff, because now it's going to show that everything that was already closed for that prior period now has been reopened in the next period, and then they'd have to go through and close them all. So the best practice at XCM when doing your points, your knowledge, your questions, your instructions, and your review points is to do them at the task level, because then you don't even have to think about it. Whether you turn on auto rollover or you do manual, they're automatically going to roll the way you're telling it to roll in there. You can put your budgeting information in here. So you could do budget to this year's budget or your actuals or both. You can roll over your information related to your client entity letters, your engagement letters, your checklists. If you're using the default checklists and they're always going to be the same and you've created these in the utility, you don't have to do anything here. You don't have to check that box. If you're using that default utilities and you've set your utilities up in the checklist utility box, they're automatically always going to roll with your tasks. However, if you're creating checklists on the fly and you're not using the utility, so you go into a task and each task you go into, maybe you're using a different checklist for them and you're putting those in there, then you're going to want to use this and check off this box to carry those forward. You can carry your comments over if you would like. If you use the document section of XCM where your network file links and your pro system FX links are, if you want to carry those over, you can. Do note that that section, the network file links and the pro system FX file links, function just like the points do. So if you're marking them current, next, or permanent in that section at the task level, you don't need to check the boxes in here. Your firm options, if you're using these at the utility level and you've already decided you want these to roll, it's automatically going to fill in for you and say it's already been decided, so we're letting that go. And then the last one is if you're using our scheduler and you're using calendar scheduler, if you want to have or you want to bring last year's schedule forward 1 year so that you have a starting point, you have the ability to do that by checking this Cal Scheduler button. And again, that will bring your schedule 1 year forward so you can start. Now, we all know if anybody who's out there using it, if you carry it forward the 1 year, it's going to have the information in there you need. You're still going to have to go through, and if it's not starting at the same time, make changes, but at least it'll be in there. The other thing that you're asked to do in this section is to fill in the year. So you have 3 options. You can say new fiscal year, and you can put that in here manually. You can say new period end date. So maybe you have a corporation that has a short year and you have to file a short year next year. So you only want it to roll, with a period end of 6/30. You can put that date in there. You simply check the box and change the date. Or you can just say add 1 year and it will roll it automatically over to the 1 year. Just going to put 2020 in here. And then the last thing you have that you can put in is pulling your staff from your previous task or pulling your staff from the client entity database. So what does this mean? If you have task information in your control sheet under the staffing section, and let's say I have Michelle Ake filled in as the tax staff. I made that manual change to the staffing section because the person who's in my client database assigned to that role was on leave. So I had to pull Michelle into it and put her on the control sheet as the active task in the staffing role. Do I want to do that next year? Maybe I do, because now maybe Michelle is still going to work on it, so I can just roll her forward. Or I can say, you know what, no, I wanted to pull from what I originally put in my client entity database when I set this client up. So when you set your clients up, if you assigned those roles to specific people, and just remember when you set up your client entity, the only role you have to put in is your responsible person, but you also have the ability to assign other roles in there. So if you want to pull that information, because maybe it's the same engagement team year after year, and Michelle Beamer was that tax staff that was out on leave, but she's back next year, I want her to roll, I have the ability to pull staffing from the client entity database. And then you can just hit save. And then once you hit save, it's going to process and your task will have rolled over. So you should be able to go in and you'll search and you should have a Nancy Johansson 2020. So I mentioned earlier, you can do a manual rollover 2 different ways. You can do it task by task through the control sheet, which we just did, or you can use the utility and manually roll over multiple tasks at a time. So under your task utility, we have a rollover task. So you can come in here, you can search by a specific entity name. You can search by a specific fiscal year, and then you can hit search. So this is going to bring up all of my 2019s that I need to roll over. So I can come in here and I can select 3 or 4 of them that I want to go, or I could select all of them by selecting the checkbox here to select them all to go, but for training purposes, we'll say we're only going to do a few. And I can say rollover. When I do the rollover, I'm going to get that rollover box, same as I just had in the other manual. So all of these options that we ran through in the manual are all the same here. So you can fill that information in, or you can leave nothing checked. You can fix the year, you can pull from your previous, and you can hit apply. When you hit apply, it'll tell you that your request has been submitted, and then it'll proceed for you, and those tasks have been rolled over. You also have in here the option to show tasks for a tax year that haven't been rolled over yet. So if you have a bunch of them, or you just want to make sure, you can say, I want to look at, what hasn't been rolled for 2019 and do a quick search. It will bring up all those tasks that need to be rolled over, and you can roll them over from here manually. All right. So the next one we're going to go into is your auto rollover. And the auto rollover is done through the manage task type utility. And this is one that always gets people in a mess. They'll turn it on and then they'll call and say, I don't know what I did. So we're going to walk through this one really slow. We're going to do it a couple times so everybody knows how to do this one. So in your manage task types, you can see this column here is auto rollover. And it will say that it's either on and ready to be edited, or it's not set. If it's not set, that means you don't have the auto rollover set up for it, and maybe you want to turn it on. So I'm going to use this T5013 as my example because it's not set. So I want to set this task type to be set to auto rollover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the top of my screen here where it says task type code. I'm going to put a check in the box. That's going to check off every task type, and then I'm going to uncheck it. Once I uncheck it, I'm going to go down to my TS013. I'm going to check the box next to that one, only that one, because that's the one I want to turn on. And I'm going to come up here to the auto rollover and click the button. I click the button here, and again, same task information that I want to roll. So again, you'll be able to put that information in. Once you put it in the one time, you don't have to do it all the time. You're telling it now, I want it to roll with all of this information, or leave it, and it will roll with that. One thing you need to notice in here is that it's always defaulted to daily. So if you want it to go to any other weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi, or annually, you want to make sure you select this. So select the annual, because we're going to have it roll annually. That could be the only thing you want to change in here. Maybe you don't want to add any of these other things based on what we just talked about. Maybe you want it to always pull from your previous task. That's fine. If there's nothing else you remember, always remember to check your new period end to make sure it's set to what you want it to be. Once you've done that, you come down and you hit apply. As soon as you hit apply, remove your hand from the mouse. This is my colleague, Michelle Ake. If you know her, she says this all the time, and it works. What you saw my screen do is it blinked, and it has now turned on my TS103 to this automatic auto rollover. So if I want to edit this, I can check the box, or I can check edit. I can come in here and say, well, I want my shipping to go. I want it to be annually, and then I can hit apply, and it will apply the edits. Editing is very simple. It's the turning it on that gets people all the time. And then you can also turn it off. You can just say, you know what, I want it turned off. I don't want it on for that. And then it will, in the blink, it is now no longer set for that. So I'm going to walk through it one more time because this is the trickiest one of all. This time I'm going to select my foreign individual filers here. So we're going to come in and we're going to say check the box, let everything check. uncheck it, it unchecks everything. Come down to the foreign individual filer and check the box. Go up to the top and hit auto rollover. Select what you want to select, anything here, but always remember to select your daily or annual or whatever. So we'll say annual here. Hit the apply button, remove your hand from the mouse, let the system blink, and then go down and look. You now have your foreign filers or individual filers turned on. Okay, so a lot of people, when they get in here, it is tricky and they get scared. They select something and it doesn't work that way. If something does happen when you're doing it, you can always reach out to support and we will help you through it. But just so everybody understands the functionality of how you turn it on. So now that they're turned on, and you can see here we have our 1040s, our 1041s, everything is on an automatic. Once those tasks in that task type get moved to either completed, client preparation, or no longer filing, once they hit those, it'll automatically roll over to the next year for you. So while I'm in here, I do want to talk, we're going to move into the recurring tasks piece. And as I mentioned, you don't want to have your auto rollover task types set up as a recurring pattern. So for an example, I would come in here and I would see that my 1040 is turned on for auto rollover. So that's not the task type I want to use for my estimated payments, because I don't want it to cause it not to create properly because it's on an auto rollover. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look through and I'm going to see that my estimated payments isn't turned on. So that I set up specifically so I could do estimated tax payments and set it up as a recurring task. You can also see we have one for individual estimates. So if you don't have a specific task type set up for it, it's very simple to do. You can come up and you just have to enter a task code. So it just has to be, let's see, tax, yes. And then a description. So we'll say estimates. You can tell it what tax category what category you want it to be for. Is it tax, financial, or bookkeeping? We'll stick with tax. But if you were doing quarterlies, maybe you want to set it up for your bookkeepings. What is your filing method going to be? Is it going to be paper? Is it going to be e-file? You don't want to link it to anything. And then once you do that, you just say update and it will create that task type for you. To turn a task type on or off, you just check the box next to it and hit update, and that will turn that task type on for you. Okay, so now we're going to walk through how you set up a recurring task. So remember, we want to set up, in our example, not quarterlies, estimated payments. And we want to set them up for Nancy Silvestri. So what I want to do is I want to create, the first thing I have to do is create that task to set the pattern against. So I'm going to come over here to my add task button. I'm going to find Nancy Silvestri in my list. And I'm going to select the task type. So I'm going to select the tax individual estimates because that's the type I want it to be for. And now I want to set the period end. So as we know, the estimates are due 4/15, 6/15, 9/15, 1/15. So we, in our example, have already gone through June. So we want to set up the 9/15 task period end. So we want to come in and set this up for September 15th. Wrong year. Let's start in 2020. So September 15th of 2020. You can add a description if you want, but I would, but you don't need to. Then you have the option to come in and say save and next, save and open, save and done. I'm going to select save and next because I want my recurring tasks to be visible on my due dates as they roll out. So I want to be able to see them. So I'm going to add a deliverable for them. So for this specific task type that I have set up, we have a deliverable set up for it. So I need to add it here. As you know, the general is a placeholder when you set up specific task types, they don't have a federal, it automatically will generate a general. So we want to go ahead and add the deliverable that's going to give us our due date. So I'm going to take my estimates. I'm going to say save. And now I have my 9/15 due date, so I know what they are. So because it's an estimate, we want the period end and the due date to essentially be the same, because essentially your period end for your estimates is the day that it's due. And we're going to go ahead and say done. So now we've created that for us. So now what we have to do is go through our recurring tasks. So back into our utilities, we're going to go in and we're going to find our manage recurring tasks under our task utility. And we're going to click the utility open. So when your recurring tasks open, it automatically will open with the create recurring task button already highlighted. So we want to go ahead and we want to create a recurring task for Nancy. So I'm going to type in Silvestri. I'm going to select for my fiscal year to be 2020 just because I just created it, but you don't have to. You can hit select if you have a task already set up that you wanted to start a pattern against. You can just go ahead and say, I don't remember what fiscal year, set it, and then search for it. And then I'm going to hit search. So this is going to open up all my tasks. It's not tasks that have recurring patterns against them. These are just all of my tasks that are set up under Silvestri for 2020. So when I look in here, I can see, I'm going to find Nancy. She's right here. I'm going to put a check mark. I know this is the one I want because it says estimate 1, and that's the task type I set up. And it has the 9/15 period end. So I'm going to put my pattern against this one. So I'm going to go ahead and check the box next to Nancy and go up to create recurring task. Once I open that create recurring task, again at the top, I'm going to get the same information you see when you do your manuals or your automatics. So you have that same option to pull this information or just leave it. The next thing you're going to have to look for is your period end recurrence pattern. So this is where you're going to tell the system, what is this? Is it a daily recurrence? Is it a weekly recurrence? Is it a monthly, a yearly, or a special option? So remember, recurring tasks has that special option field. We're going to say it's a special option just because the dates don't actually go every 3 months or whatever it is. So in here, we're going to say we have tasks due. I'm going to go in the order of April 15th. So we have estimates due on 4/15. Come on. Let me go backwards here. 4/15. We have them due on June 15th. We have them due in September. And we have them due in January. The order that you put your dates in here does not matter. It doesn't matter if you do 1/15, 4/15, 6/15, 9/15, or 9/15, 1/15, whatever order you put in here doesn't matter. This is just going to let it know that on these dates, whatever information I've given to the system, it's going to push out for those dates, okay? What is important is this next section, which is the start date for recurring tasks. So start date should equal to the period end date of the first recurring task. So the date your recurrence should start. So remember, we've already manually set up one task for 9/15. So think about that Outlook calendar. We already set up our first meeting. So our next recurrence is going to happen not on 9/15, on 1/15. So the 9/15 task is already out there. It's already visible. It's been manually set up. You're manually going to go in and move it to that person, the first step in the workflow, assign it to that person. Then when the next task needs to roll, it's going to follow this recurring pattern, but that's not going to start until 1/15. So we want to come in here and we want to say that on 1/15, our recurring pattern is going to start. I think I put 10/15 because I can't see. So let's move out to the 1/15 here. There we go. So 1/15 of 2021, my next task is going to roll. Okay. Then once you have that set, you can come in here and you can do your task default settings. And in your task default settings, you have the ability to set up when it's going to roll, who it's going to roll to. So you can give it a task description if you want to. You can assign it to the responsible person by checking this box. If you assign it to the responsible person, what's going to happen is it's going to go to the responsible person assigned to your task. And ultimately, that responsible person for most of your tasks is probably a partner and most likely doesn't want all of these estimates to go to their MyView page. So we give you the other option, which is to push it to an individual's MyView page. So this is where you're going to do that. You're going to say the recurring task is going to push to, and you're going to come over and choose that person. So I'm going to say it's going to push to my MyView page, but you can select anybody in your firm. Do you want it to push out to an admin? Do you have one person in your admin team that then assigns the estimates out? Do you have one staff person who's responsible for doing all of these tasks, estimate tasks? You can push it to that person. So I'm going to select myself, and I'm just going to go up here and hit apply. And you're going to see my name come in here. So now when it pushes, it's going to go to my MyView page. And then I get the chance to tell it when it's going to do it. Do I want it to go on the 15th of September? No, I want it to go before then. So I'm going to select 15 days. You can select 15, you can say 5, you can say 30, but I want it to push out 15 days before the recurrence, and then I should see it on January 1st or thereabouts. The other option you have is to push it out to X amount of days after the period end. Most of the times I don't see a lot of people pushing them out afterwards, but I've seen a couple. But for the most part, we do it before. So now we've filled in all of our information. So remember, you're going to check off any information up here. You're going to put in the dates you want it to occur on. Then you're going to say, when do you want it to start? So we've already started our first recurring pattern for the 9/15. We're going to manually do that one. So the first automatic one that's going to come out through the recurrence is going to happen on 1/15. It's going to push to my MyView page 15 days before, and I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to get this message that says recurrence has been scheduled, and I'm going to say okay. So now I know on the 1st of January, I should see an estimated task show up on my MyView page. I'm going to put a calendar reminder to check it, maybe on the 2nd, just to make sure it's there. But now the system is going to go ahead and do whatever it needs to do moving forward. So what happens if I leave the company and all of these tasks are being pushed out to me? I need to go in and I need to edit that recurring task or all of those tasks that have been assigned to me. So to do that, you go to the edit recurring task, you do the Silvestri. Let's look for Nancy right here. So what this grid here is telling you is what the task is. It'll give you when the last created was out and then what the next ones are coming. So we're going to go into Nancy, we're going to check the box, and we're going to say edit recurring task. We're going to come down to my name, and we're going to say Amy is no longer here. We're going to give it to Michelle Beamer. We'll hit apply, and then just hit apply at the bottom. That's it. That's all you have to do to make the edits. It'll say the recurrence has been scheduled. You can say okay. So now the next time that task rolls out, it's going to push to Michelle Beamer. Remember, it's easy to create your recurring tasks in bulk, but to make those edits, we'd have to go through and check each one individually to make the changes. So I have just one more thing to show you, and then I'm going to open it up to my last polling question, and then I will open it up for questions, for any questions that may have come through. All right, so in the reports, under the administrative reports, we have recurring tasks. If you open your recurring tasks, I usually just run this report. It's pulling kind of funky, so let me see if I can get it to my screen. There we go. So this is going to be what what outputs from my my filters. I can hit the Excel and I can export it to Excel if I want, but for purposes of training, we're just going to look at it here. So this report is going to tell you what the client is, your account number, your group number, and group names. It'll give you a whole bunch of information to the side of who's involved, who's assigned to it in the roles. But the two things I want to point out is the recurrence pattern column. This is going to tell you what type of pattern you set up for it. So did you set up a monthly? Did you set up a special option? Is it daily, annually? So if you have any questions on those, you can always run this report to see what type of recurring pattern you set up for it. And then also, who did you push it to? So if I leave the company and I have tasks that are being pushed out to me through the recurring patterns, I can come in or somebody can come in and run this report, export it to Excel, sort it by my name, and then go in and do those edits to move it to the new person that it's going to push to. Okay, so that concludes our walkthrough of this session. I do have one last polling question, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So let's see. What is the advantage in using recurring tasks versus the auto rollover? Just going to give a few more minutes. All right, I'm going to close the poll now and share out these results. Looks like many people were paying attention, and the answer is all of the above. So the one, the tasks, the recurring can have it pushed to a person's My View. You can set them up monthly, annually, quarterly, or a special option. You can control when that task is being created. So all of the above is the correct answer. Awesome job. All right, let's open it up for some questions. I do have some here, so bear with me while I just look at them quickly. And as I mentioned, if I don't get to all of your questions, we will go ahead and loop back with you after. All right. Any enhancements to have no info status once removed? And I'm not sure what that one means. So I will follow up with you after this session. Can miscellaneous tasks set up a recurring? So if you have a miscellaneous task type set up, then you can turn that on and you can set up a recurring pattern based on it. What if the first quarter you are setting up is 4/30? Will the other quarters have the due date of the 30th? So when you set up your quarters in the recurring task here, if you set up the first task type, let me go into an edit. If you set up the first one to be 4/30, it's those dates that you put in. Let's just look at one here. When we go in and we'll look at a quarterly. So when you come to your quarterlies, you can set up the dates that you want in this special option. So if it's 4/30, maybe the next one is 6/30, or maybe it's 7/1, depending, you can put those in and it will tell the system when you want to push them out. So I would say if you don't want them all to be the 30th, then set them up as a special option to tell what it is. And I do apologize, we didn't click on all of these. So when you do a daily, you can say every 1 day, 10 days, every weekday. When you look at your weeklies, you can recur it once a week, twice a week, and pick the date. On your monthlies, you can say the first day of every 1 month, or the first, second, third, or fourth Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of every 1 month as well. And then your yearlies or your special options. Can recurrences be set up by client, or is it firm-wide by task type? We have 2 offices with different likes. So you can set it up by client, but you would have to select the task type. So you would have to have that task type set up for it. So if you have 2 offices and you have obviously different clients in each one of those offices, you could set up the same task type for each one and then just create the task for that client against that task type. And I apologize if I'm not answering your questions. If you want to just let me know, I can also follow up with you afterwards. So which comments carry over from task information or from shipping? So the comments that carry over in any one of these is going to be from your task information. It's not the shipping or assembly. So any comments, anything in shipping and assembly is only going to roll the instructions. It's not going to roll anything else from there. Doesn't the next year auto-populate? So the next year on your tasks will only auto-populate if you have the auto rollover turned on. So if you're seeing them automatically roll and populate once you've moved them to those 3 task types, task statuses, I apologize, then they're automatically there. So if you're seeing it, it's been turned on already. So if you're not seeing them automatically go, then that specific task type might not be set up. And a lot of firms do set up a good amount of their task types to automatically roll. So, your standard ones, if you're in the tax side, your standard 1040s, 1065s, 1120s, 1120Ss, and so on, they may already be turned on to go annually. It's your other ones that, if you want to look at your quarterlies or your estimates, that you want to make sure that you're either having them turned on or setting up the recurring pattern for. Can can editing recurring tasks in bulk be added as a future development? Absolutely. Absolutely, I don't know if it will be, but you can absolutely 100% submit an enhancement to so it would be enhancements at xcmsolutions.com to see if is something that they consider. So the way our enhancements work is the more people that ask for that enhancement, the more we say, oh, this must be something a lot of people want to see. So it would be something that they may consider down the road. So I'm not sure if it's in the pipeline to be updated now, but if it is something that you want to see happen or be enhanced in our system, I would recommend to have that submitted to the enhancements team. All right, I've got time for one more. And yes, the presentation is going to be submitted. So if I did not get to your questions today, I'm going to pull the report from this and I will follow up with you through the email that you submitted or you registered with. So look for that email. I will answer all of those questions. We did get a bunch of them coming in, so I will follow up and make sure that everybody gets the answers to their questions. Again, I thank everyone for your time today. A recording of this has been made. It will be submitted or sent out email to you tomorrow. It'll come from GoToWebinars, and it will have a copy of the recording, and then it will also tell you where you can find the recording, and the presentation will also be saved out on our help center. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Again, thank you for your time on this webinar this afternoon, and I will follow up with any questions that I didn't get to. Thanks, everyone.